So, I've said it many times before, never settle. Never settle and be patient to receive what is truly best for you. And though I believe that most of you understand and embrace that, the reality of life is sometimes we reach a point where we start thinking, well, maybe we should be more flexible with our requirements or what we're looking for and who we consider to entertain. And I think it's understandable. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do in most cases, but it's understandable to feel that way and to start to give it a second thought, so to speak, right? And so this can lead a lot of women to eventually giving a man an opportunity that they were resisting for a while. Now, understand that not every case of finally giving that man a chance is quote unquote settling. There could be various other reasons why a woman isn't interested or just not in the right mindset. And then finally she decides she's at a better place now to entertain this, right? But there are questions I think a woman needs to ask herself that to make sure she's not settling, but rather she is just exploring a new opportunity. Okay? Because there's nothing wrong with exploring new opportunities. There's nothing wrong with trying some different things out. But when it's a settling, or not even just settling, when it's coming from the wrong place, that's going to be a setup for disaster. And I have coached and sat with tons of women, whether in the dating phase, official relationship, married, divorced, who overlooked certain things and ended up with a man that it just became a huge mess with. And I don't want that to happen to you, okay? So, one of the big questions I want you to ask yourself when you finally decide to give a certain man a chance is, are you overlooking a lack of attraction? All right. Now, I know some of you maybe feel I harp on attraction too much. Okay. And I understand. Plenty of people believe it's not what's on the outside that counts, it's what's on the inside that matters. And absolutely, I think we can all agree what's on the inside matters most, but we can't act like the outside doesn't matter at all. And with all due respect, even those who say, oh, well, attraction doesn't matter to me or looks doesn't matter to me, well, I think the more accurate thing to say is looks may not be as important to you, but they still matter. Because at the end of the day, everyone has their line. Everyone has a certain type that they would not be willing to entertain, regardless of how nice and sweet the guy is and wonderful he is. There's certain things that you're just not going to be able to deal with. I'm just going to throw one example. For some of y'all, it might be if he's, I don't know, 5, 6 inches shorter than you. I'm not saying you can't give a short king a chance. I'm just saying some of y'all would be immediately like, oh no, that's too much. I can't deal with that, right? So in reality, it does matter to some extent. However, to get to the point I'm trying to make here, the reason why I want you to ask yourself, or to make sure you ask yourself the question of, are you overlooking attraction, is because what I have seen is many situations where the resistance to giving that man a chance for so long was because there wasn't really an attraction there. Okay? He wasn't really your style. He didn't really do it for you, right? And then again, eventually over time, whether because he is so persistent or you're at a vulnerable moment in life, you feel like your clock is ticking. There's so many different reasons, and we're going to talk about some of those as we go along in the video. You decide to give it a try, but you're ignoring the fact that the reason why you didn't want to is because you're not really attracted to him. And some people have this mentality of, well, okay, maybe I can get over that, or maybe he's such a nice guy that I'll appreciate that about him. And I'm not saying there's never been a woman who started off not attracted to a guy and didn't fall in love with him for different reasons, because the reality is that for a lot of women, for people in general, but I would say more so for women, attraction encompasses a lot more than just how someone looks, okay? However, I've seen many relationships where the woman proceeded, yes, because he was a good guy, all these different things, but the attraction still wasn't there. And it never developed. Okay. And unfortunately, if you get too involved without that really being resolved, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you may have a harder time now walking away. And one story that's coming to mind real quick, I had a client one time where she was dating a guy, she was not attracted to him at all. And it was so bad that, excuse me, she had to drink. She had to get drunk to be intimate with him every single time. I'm sure we can all agree that's extremely unhealthy, extremely unfortunate, extremely sad. And part of the reason that she tried to still be with him was he was a good guy. He also was very much a provider. So there was different things that made her want to keep this going. But at the same time, like inevitably it ended at some point. But this happens, right? And some people may feel ashamed to acknowledge that. And I don't ever want y'all to feel shame and beat yourselves up. I just want to bring light to real situations to help you avoid certain pitfalls. And so, yeah, and I've seen people get married to that guy they're not attracted to. And then again, you're looking at it from that woman who does it is looking at it from the perception of, okay, I think I can deal with this or manage this. But in her head, managing it and dealing with it means I can remain in this relationship with him. What she's overlooking is I am not as motivated to be intimate with him. I may not show him the same amount of respect I would if I was more attracted to him. I don't talk to him the way that I would talk to a guy that I'm really into in that way. And so even though you're with him, you're depriving him of things that he needs, and that is a recipe for more disaster. So I don't want to keep dragging this point on because we got more to talk about, but I just really feel it's important for a person, for a woman, for anybody to not overlook attraction. Again, not looks, not that they have to look a specific certain way, but you have to be attracted to them. And I think the big question we can add to this that you can ask yourself is, no matter what the attraction level is, am I motivated enough to show up for him and pour into him in all the ways that he needs? Because if you can do that, if you can be as intimate, as loving, as respectful as all these things, despite the lack of attraction that exists, then you're good to go. Okay, cool. But if you know those things are going to suffer, nah, you can't. You should not continue to move forward. All right. So here's another big question you should ask yourself when you finally give that man a chance is, are you doing this just to make family and friends, or even more specifically, to get family and friends off your back? So you may not know this, but I have 3 sisters. All right. I'm the only boy and come from a Caribbean family, Haitian to be specific. And, I love all my family, love my people. And I've grown, and this happens in various cultures, right? Where the women in the family, there's a lot of pressure, and even the guys, a lot of pressure from when you're gonna get married, when you're gonna have kids, right? And again, this can happen in any culture, and it does happen in many cultures. And so I grew up seeing a lot of the pressure that can be put on women, right? And I know how that can sway a lot of women to trying to make things happen, even though it's not always the best fit. Okay. And not wanting to no longer have to deal with those questions um, and even just their own perceptions of when I should have been married. Because there's a lot of women who growing up had this perception of, okay, by this age, I'm going to be married, and this age, I'm going to have kids, and boom, boom, boom. And they mapped it all out. And then you reach that point and those things aren't achieved. And for some, that can make you feel a little antsy. That can make you start to bend on your requirements and again, lead to settling, right? And so I don't want, what you have to remember is at the end of the day, you're going to have to wake up next to this man, not, you're going to have to be in this relationship with that man, not them. So even though I've seen people achieve on the surface, making the family and friends happy, and oh, you a man now, and oh, you're gonna eventually get married, and blah, 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 we're gonna have some grandkids and whatever, whatever. I've seen some of those same people suffer and do everything in their power to keep it together because they did not want to deal with the flip side of things. Okay. And that is very unfortunate. And that is very sad. And I feel the need to say this. I've even seen people where it goes as far as marriage. The marriage is miserable, unhappy. And now when they try to leave, right, that same pressure they received from maybe family and friends to even get in this situation, they're now receiving to stay in a situation they're not happy about, right? And I have to add this as well, because one thing I've said many times before is that one of the worst positions for a woman to be in, and a lot of times the things I say can apply to men and women, but one of the worst positions for a woman to be in is with a good man that they're not really in love with or into. Because even though they're not happy with that man, because he's not a bad man and hasn't done anything blatantly bad, excuse me, they struggle to validate to family, to friends, to themselves why they should leave. But they're so unhappy. And they've been unhappy for years now. It's not like it just all of a sudden happened, which I have to say, I really don't like when I hear people claiming like a woman just wakes up one day and is like, she's no longer happy in a relationship. And it's like, no, that's not what, I'm not saying that's never ever happened. I don't know, but I can say for certain that in most cases, that's not what it is. It's a build up over time. It's been sitting with her. She may have been fighting it for a long time, and then she reaches a breaking point. It's like, I can't do this anymore. You know what I'm saying? And it's unfortunate, it's sad, and yeah, people may look at the man and say, oh, he's this innocent bystander, and she's just gonna throw him away. And it's like, but they don't fit together. And I'm not trying to like push people to get divorces, but I also am not unrealistic with the fact that there's a lot of people who got married to the wrong person. There's a lot of people in long-term relationships with the wrong person. There's a lot of people dating the wrong person. And it doesn't lead to good things. You know what I'm saying? Like, at the end of the day, I'm trying to help create more healthy, happy, not just relationships with two people, man and woman, romantic relationships, relationships with yourself, relationships with God, just an overall higher quality of life. And so to get back to this point, we got to fight that outside pressure. I know it's tough. I know it's difficult, right? But I don't want you to let it get the best of you for any of you who are dealing with that right now or who may come across that at some point, okay? And I will say this. I do think it's important that when you are asked a question, like let's say you go to a family holiday and they're like, so what's going on with the love life? And you kind of give this vague answer and they're like, when you going to get somebody? You need to do this, you need to do that, boom, boom. And sometimes they can be very insensitive, right? And I think it's important to be honest about what's going on with you. Because when you give people BS and vague answers, I feel like that only fuels them to push harder and come at you more. And I think if we open up and be transparent about maybe what our struggles are, what's going on, why it hasn't happened yet, that may help. And also just being honest about how it makes you feel when they're putting that pressure on you. And let me say that there's a different kind of pressure when it comes to friends where it's not them specifically pressuring you, but some of you may be experiencing where you're seeing all your friends get married, right? And you're still single. And that creates a pressure on you. But one thing I want to remind y'all sometimes, now this doesn't apply to everybody, but I have to tell women, like, look around at your friends. Would you have married the same man they married? No shade to anybody, but I'm saying, 99% of the time when I ask that question, they're like, no, I wouldn't. Really, 100% of the time. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, yeah, I would have liked a man like that. No. So sometimes other people are getting in relationships not because they're doing what's best, they're doing what's right, or they're getting a great thing. It's for various reasons. And that's why I say all the time, like, don't covet and focus on what other people have, because you don't know the price they pay to get it and you don't know the price they're paying to keep it. All right. And if you have to pay that same price, you may not want it anymore yourself. So All that to say, you got to make sure that outside noise isn't what's pushing you to give this man a chance and potentially get with someone who's not best for you. All right. So let's keep this going. Another big question to ask yourself before you finally give this man a chance, or when you do, is, are you doing this out of a fear of being alone? So, I think it's understandable for a lot of people to struggle, because even those who are not feeling like they don't feel lonely or alone in general, it's still you can still have lonely moments, right? And enough of those moments can start to make you feel like you need to make something happen. And then for some people, if we're just keeping it real, they do feel lonely. They don't like being single. They want a relationship, right? That's what their heart truly desires. And I do believe that we have to learn how to find some level of peace while single. And it doesn't mean, like I say, you don't have to be happy that you are single, but you have to learn how to be happy while you're single. Okay, let me say that one more time. You don't have to be happy that you are single, but you have to learn how to be happy while you're single. Because if you're not happy or find peace and some level of joy, even in your single season, that that negative energy can start to work against you. All right, that pessimism can start to work against you. That loss of hope, right, can start to push you into doing things or entertaining people that you shouldn't. You have to be very careful with that, right? And also and understand that by learning how to find joy and peace even in our single season, I believe that strengthens you and the relationship that you will eventually find yourself in, because you not become so dependent on your partner for peace and happiness. Though of course we're supposed to pour that into each other, you don't depend on it because you know how to create it within yourself. Okay? But that fear of being alone is very real for a lot of people. And again, it causes people to rush into relationships they should not be in at all. And so I do think that to help resolve that fear, we got to get to the root issues. Okay. For a lot of people, that fear of being alone stems from previous trauma that hasn't been resolved. So a lot of people have abandonment issues. A lot of people feel like everyone that they cared for and loved left them or betrayed them and things of that nature, right? For some people, it may be you grew up in maybe you grew up around other women who they're much older and they never found love and they never found a good relationship, and you're like, I don't want to end up like that. Like there's just so many different reasons that can create that fear in you. But you got to remember that at the end of the day, we got to walk in faith, not fear. And I know that's easier said than done, right? But we got to strive for it. We got to keep pushing towards it. We got to include God in that process. And of course, I'm going to talk a little bit more about God later. But we just got to hold on to that and understand that let's not focus on what we don't have. Let's focus on what we need to be doing. All right. Let's not just focus on what we're wishing for. Let's focus on how can I be obedient right now in this season of my life? How can I be productive in this season of my life? How can I optimize myself and reach a new level while in this season, which will only make it better and increase our ability to receive not just the person that's best for us, but just all the blessings that come along with elevating ourselves. So that fear of being alone, fight it, keep pushing, and know that better is going to come. All right. So real quick, if anyone who wants coaching, maybe you want to read one of my books, come to one of my live events, go to stephanspeakshop.com. You can click the link in the description or in the comments section. There's a lot of resources there for you. Check it out. But let's continue. So another big question to ask yourself when you finally given that man who's been pursuing you a chance is there a sexual disconnect? Now, some of you might be saying, well, we ain't supposed to be having no sex. What are you talking about? Now, listen, whenever I discuss sex, it is not to say go have it. It is not to promote it, but it is to acknowledge that many, myself included, has fallen short when it comes to that, has struggled with that, who has crossed that line before, right? And some of you may be in situations where that line has already been crossed. And so I don't want to sit here and judge anybody and speak down on nobody. No, I still want to give you guidance based on what you're dealing with. Okay. And so one of the things I have seen in many situations is women being with men where there is a sexual disconnect, but she views him as such a good guy. She views this as an opportunity to finally have that wedding and that family she dreamed of and the whole aesthetic that she's had in her mind for so long that she's fantasized about, and figures, you know what, sex ain't that important to me, or I could get past that. I could do without that, right? And it kind of goes back to what I said with the attraction piece, where it's like, okay, yeah, you may be able to be okay without it or a lower level of it because maybe it's not as important to you. Because we got to put something out real quick. I'm not saying this is every woman, but a lot of women. I always say this: if there's two doors, one door is hugs, kisses, long talks, holding hands, all this intimate, affectionate stuff. And then door number two is sex, just straight sex, right? Majority of women are choosing door number one. It doesn't mean they don't care for door number two, but not as much as door number one. On the flip side, a lot of men are choosing door number two. It doesn't mean they don't care about number one at all, but number two is priority, okay? And so I think we have to be more honest about that, right? And there's a lot of women out there who they generally don't care about sex like that. But society doesn't make a lot of women feel comfortable about that reality because well, what's wrong with you? Or you ain't having good yet. And it's like, no, it's not for them like this. That's not their thing. That's not their thing. But we all know it plays a role in serious long-term relationships, right? So even if a woman doesn't care for it, she's not going to go around announcing that because she's like, well, how am I going to get a husband? I'm over here telling everybody I don't want sex or whatever the case may be. So anyways, to get back to the point, this leads to, there's a lot of marriages that have occurred where that disconnect always existed. And she may have been able to manage it for a while. But after getting married, after maybe kids come into play, that whole thing falls to the wayside. But again, it's not just falling to the wayside simply because other factors have come into play. It's falling to the wayside because she couldn't keep up dealing with what she wasn't really getting satisfied from anyway for much longer. Plain and simple. And if anything, kids, work, whatever, gave her a good excuse in her mind to have to not deal with that anymore. Problem is, this is one of the biggest issues you're going to hear from men that are unhappy in a marriage or in a long-term relationship, is a lack of intimacy. And this is one of the things that can create a huge division in a relationship and snowball into so many other problems. And the whole thing blows up, but it started with this disconnect that existed the whole time. And this is why I'm such a believer in we got to establish relationships where we can be more forthcoming with each other about what is lacking, what we're not satisfied with, and how we can better manage that. Now, I feel the need to throw this out there because, again, if you are a woman who just doesn't care for it like that, right? Like I had a client once where she said straight up, she doesn't really care for it, but she loves the intimacy she gets from her man. So for her compromise and way to work with this was, as long as he's going to give me the intimacy part with it, I'll do my part and push through. All right, I'll take one for the team because he gives me what I need otherwise. But if you're a woman, and this happens to a lot of women, where you feel like, dang, I'm not getting the intimacy and affection and attention I want, but then you want me to satisfy you too, that's not going to work. But there needs to be honest conversation about that because a lot of men don't understand that. Because in the dating phase, that's not being made known to them. They're being led to believe, oh, if a woman is just a quote unquote freak or she just loves it like that, then that just means it's in her, she's like him and they're good to go. And it's like, no, there's so much more to it than that for most women. Some may fall under that category, but I would argue that's not Majority, okay? Bottom line is that cannot be overlooked or should not be overlooked, okay? It doesn't mean it cannot be resolved. A sexual disconnect is not an automatic killer, meaning if you talk about it, address it, there is still a possibility it can be corrected and fixed. And like I said, maybe compromises can be found and all these things. But if you don't properly address it, because I understand the fear from a lot of women is the man's ego is too fragile, it's gonna hurt his feelings, it may push him away. And so because of that concern, she doesn't say what it is. But it's like, yo, if you can't talk to him about it and express yourself in a positive, loving way, and he can't accept that for the sake of making things better, we got a problem. All right, so I originally had a few more, but I've been rolling along with this one, and a lot of things were coming out. And let me just say real quick, I know some people feel like I be going on and on, but a lot of that is very intentional because I do feel like there's so much nuance to these relationship discussions and issues and what people are facing. And there's so many different possible scenarios and things and different angles. Again, I've seen so much. I've been doing this for over 15 years, and I want to make sure as many people are getting what they need and hearing something that resonates with them as much as possible. And so sometimes that's gonna lead to me speaking for a while on a lot of different topics and points. Okay, but anyways, let's get to again. I'm gonna leave the other points for a different video, but I do still have a couple more that I can mention here today. So the next big question you need to ask yourself when you finally give that man a chance is there truly a connection here? All right. Because here's the thing that I truly believe. And just to give a brief overview of connection, and I do think I want to need to go a lot deeper in this, but some brief points about connection. Connection to me is your spirit recognizing its match, your spirit recognizing who it aligns with. It is your ability to be yourself with this person and they be themselves and you two truly still really genuinely like each other. Like there's a lot of people who are together who don't really like their partner at their core. They found a lot of beneficial reasons to be together. There's a lot on the surface, the resume of it, but going deeper, it's not really there. There's not really a lot of substance there. They don't really like. If they were locked in a room together for hours, they might hurt each other after a while because they don't get along like that. Truly, they just have a lots of distractions to help them be together. So connection is you can be yourself with each other. You're drawn to each other. It's natural. You don't have to force it with them. It flows so naturally with them. Okay. Though people may struggle sometimes to be with the person that they have a connection with because of fears, traumas, all this other outside noise, but how those two people interact is like magic. It's just people who have experienced a connection, it's intense, it's something rare, it's beautiful. All that said, I am a believer, and there's going to be people out there who don't agree, but I am a strong believer that something is hitting my spirit. I'm going to say it in a second. I didn't want to say it, but I feel like I got to speak on it. But I'm a strong believer that if you don't have the connection, the relationship is going to fail. Okay? Maybe it may be year 1, it may be year 3, it may be year 10. At some point, it's going to fail. And even if it takes 10, 15 years, it's going to be a lot of miserable years until it finally hits the fan and nobody can take it. Either one or the other or both can't take it anymore. Okay? So this is why I push very hard for connection. Now, what was hitting my spirit that I feel the need to say is this. And this is just a theory. So I'm not going to sit here and say this is 100% accurate, but this is a theory of mine that I believe that I think I need to share. Everyone on this earth, from my understanding, is not a child of God. All right? I'm not here to say who is and who isn't. I'm just here to say not everyone who walks this earth is a child of God. And children of God are not meant to just be with any and everybody. There are certain people that they can align themselves with. There are certain people they can achieve purpose with, okay? And so I do believe that there's a possibility that there's the children of God can experience the connection, but people outside of that may not have that same ability. Okay? I know this might sound like crazy talk to some people. And again, I'm just saying it's the theory. I even want to touch on this, but I really feel like my spirit was nudging, pushing me, not even just nudging, giving me a kick. So I'm just going to say this to wrap that part up. This is why I really believe we have to include God in the process. Because again, it's not about us just evaluating things from the surface. Okay, a lot of people have gotten with someone or married someone because it made sense on the surface. The resume looked right. We get along, our families get along, whatever the case may be, right? And that might be all great stuff. But that does not confirm that is the right person for you. That does not confirm this is the person you can successfully do life with. This does not confirm there is a connection there. But what can confirm that is God. And so that's why I'm going to always tell y'all to pray, to learn how to connect with your spirit, to hear God, to be in tune with your intuition. I believe every child of God has intuition. However, we are not trained to be in tune with it and master it, right? And there's so many people, and I have to say women, because I do believe for women it's even stronger. So many women overlook it, rationalize past it, and it gets them in so much trouble because it's not that their intuition did not tell them this guy ain't it. It's that they wanted to believe otherwise. And I understand why it happens. I understand why you might say to yourself, nah, I'm tripping. That's just maybe me talking to myself right now. This is a good guy. Or I want this situation. Or even though there's red flags, I think I can make this work. I get it. But I see what happens in the end. I see the suffering. I see the broken homes. I see the dysfunction. And I'm trying to help y'all avoid that as much as possible. So bottom line, you got to ask yourself there's a connection. But to help you with that, you got to go to God. You got to pray. You got to get in tune with your intuition. And when you do, I'm telling you, you're going to be able to set yourself up for a much better, amazing relationship and receiving all the things that God has for you. Thank you for watching this video. I pray it was helpful to you. Be sure to watch this one over here on Prepare to Receive Your Future Husband by doing these 7 things. I think what's important is that you go where you are happy. You just start enjoying life, all right? Not going out for the simple purpose of meeting a